Greetings and salutations, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Morning.
Is it raining where anyone is? It's very dark here, but not actually raining.
It's actually
Same
gorgeous.
here.
Someone has it gorgeous where they are. Someone else said it
Figures.
was raining or not raining where they were.
It's dark and looking like it's approaching.
Okay.
Rain.
Well, supposedly Clinton and North is supposed to be where the action is. We're a little bit south here. Okay, can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so before we get started, quick look at what I did as far as slight rejiggering of the schedule. So we have 5 days left, and we're finishing up PHP's regular expressions today. And I decided I was rushing through JavaScript too fast when I actually started reading the book to prepare for class today. And by the time I got to chapter 8, I was like, wow, even though all this stuff in chapter 6 is pretty familiar because it's so C-like, I was still pretty mentally woofed. And I thought, that's going through a lot. So I decided to add an extra day for JavaScript. So today we are only going over basic JavaScript, and we are deferring regular expressions and classes until Thursday. And then on Thursday, we'll only cover the document object model, which allows JavaScript to modify a web page. Then next Tuesday, we will talk about how JavaScript interacts with the browser via events, timers, and web storage, and how it interacts with the server via Ajax. And then a week from Thursday, we'll talk about jQuery. And what is kind of now left for just one day as a result of my rejiggering is Node.js and Express. What got sacrificed is a in-class tutorial, which you see here. Actually, here it is over here. I'll perhaps try to go over it in class. I used to do it as an in-class activity, but quite frankly, when I tried to do it via Zoom last spring, it was a lot harder to do it there than it was to do it in class. And also I had a TA assisting me last year, and I wouldn't this year. So I decided best thing to do was to punt on the in-class tutorial, just do a lecture over Node.js, perhaps go walk through the tutorial in class. And that way, as I said, I don't have to go through JavaScript as quickly, can go through it at a more relaxed pace. So that's the remaining schedule. I have not yet rejiggered, I think I'm not sure if I've rejiggered the after class activities or not. I will make sure that that gets done during office hours today. So don't be super prompt about doing the after class activity today, because I still gotta, I think, slightly modify the assignments. Okay, before I get started, I had a good question on Piazza that I wanted to actually share with y'all, because I do think it can be a little confusing as far as scope issues go. And so the question, hopefully you can kind of see this. So I had said in a quiz that a PHP variable that is assigned in one code island will still be in scope in subsequent code islands. And that superficially seems to conflict with this statement right here, where I have a variable that's defined and a function, but inside the function, question is undefined. So I've made this statement that I can declare a variable in a code island, and it is available in other code islands, but it's not seemingly available inside a function. So the reason for the difference is that a code island is different than a function. So there's kind of code island scope, and then there is function scope. So anything defined in a code island, like this $question equals how are you, that was defined at the global level, and it goes into a global symbol table, and therefore it would be available to other code islands at the global level. But a function defines its own scope. And in PHP, variables are assumed to be locally declared unless you prefix, before they're used, you prefix them with the global keyword. So if in a function, foo, if I were to say global $question, now question does indeed will be the refer to the global version of question, and it would get the value, how are you? But without doing this declaration, if I start using question in the function, it's considered to be a local variable because a function introduces its own scope. And that is separate from a code island scope. So that's why the seeming disparity, why question would be available in another code island, but it's not available inside of the function, because inside the function, variables are assumed to be locally declared. Is that clear? Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Okay. So in that case, what I want to do is finish up PHP regular expressions, which we started last time, and then head into JavaScript. So you may remember regular expressions are simply a pattern that you're trying to match in a string. And we went through the fact that it could just be a regular expression, could just be a string like, say, ABC, but that's not very interesting. So we introduce the ability to, first of all, have multiple instances of something through the star, plus, and question mark characters. So star was 0 or more, plus was 1 or more, and the question mark is 0 or 1. Then also you can create so-called character classes. So this represents any digit between 0 and 9. This represents any letter. This one represents any lowercase and any uppercase letter. And you could also create, by putting a not, something that excludes. So this matches anything but A, E, I, O, and U. Okay, and I said you have to be careful because you might think this only matches consonants, but in fact, this would also match numbers and special characters like $signs and ampersands. So you do have to be a bit careful about that. Now, there are some character classes that are so common that they have introduced special codes for them. So \D represents any number between 0 and 9, so it's a digit. \W is any alphanumeric character, and this often gets people because they think it's just alphabetical, but it's not. It's alphanumeric, meaning it's A to Z, A to capital Z, 0 to 9, and the underscore character. And then there's anything that matches a space, and that matches the new line character, the \tab character, form feed, return, and a space. Then there are the classes that match the opposite. So \D, capital D, \capital W, and \capital S means anything but. So \D is not back digit, \W is not an alphanumeric character, and \capital S is anything that is not a white space character. So that makes it easier to express certain things like dates. If I want to express a date, I might say %D, %D question mark for the month, %D question mark for the day. If I want 4 digits for the year, I could say that. That was the other way I can repeat one or more instances, is put a number or a pair of numbers in curly braces like this. So this means exactly 4 instances of a digit are required here. The other thing that matches that I'd forgotten to think is the dot, and it matches anything. 1 character. Matches any 1 character. Okay, so for example, if I have B dot D, then that matches, for example, bad. It matches that. It matches that. Basically any character can be here. Then sometimes what we want is to have multiple options, and we can express that using a vertical pipe. So for example, if we want to, I showed you with months that maybe you want to be able to limit it. So you say 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, and this is, you'd keep doing bars till you got up to 12. That would match any of the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, ... up to 12. I'd have to list all of them out. The ... is not legal regular expression syntax. So those are the major categories of patterns that you typically use with a regular expression. So then the next question becomes, how do I represent a regular expression? By the way, these all use Perl style. These are Perl style regular expressions, which is what most scripting languages support these days. So PHP has a command called preg match for Perl regular expression _ match. And it takes a Perl pattern in quotes. So for those of you familiar with Perl patterns, they start with a /, they end with a / like that. So you put it in quotes, and then the string where you hope to find the pattern. So let's see. This is the most basic version of it. And let's show you an example of it in practice. So we'll create a string. We'll call it dates. And we will have Brad 5/8/1985. We'll have Eber 9/1/2005, and we'll have Smiley 5/8/2008. Okay, so that's our string. Now what we want to do is we want to echo out whether this string has a match for the pattern that you just saw. So we'll say %d, and now we'll say 1, 2. So that says there can be 1 or 2 instances of a digit, then 1 to 2 again for the date or for the day. And then we're going to require 4 digits for the year. And then we're going to ask, does that match dates? And we'll echo out a new line character as well. So let's create a second window here so you can see. Let's just save that and then bring this down here. For those of you in 365, you can see this is still my chat server showing. So let's run regexpression. Parse error, unexpected echo. And that would be because no one is telling me about my semicolons.
You missed a semicolon.
There we go. And we got a 0. That doesn't seem right. Why did I get a 0 there? So, preg match.
The dashes and slashes.
Thank you. Yep, dashes and slashes. Well, this will give us a good learning opportunity. So we don't, if I just put a slash here, that would terminate the regular expression prematurely. So instead, we can escape it with the backslash. So that says we want to escape the forward slash. The same thing here. We want to escape a forward slash. We're still not home, Odd. 1 to 2. Backslash forward slash. Backslash D 1 to 2. Backslash forward slash backslash D. I'm going to try one thing here. But I don't see why that would make a difference. Nope. What am I doing wrong? Just a moment.
Does it have to match the whole string, or just anything in the string matches?
No, it should match any part of the substring. So yeah, the good question. The question is, does it have to match the entire string? And the answer is no, it only has to match a portion of the any portion of the substring. So the match, this is what should be matched. Whoops. What should be matched is right there. And everything that I can, my notes.
Instead of one, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Instead, you have, oh, I think I see it. You have a 1,2 in your first D.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Actually, I think that's okay. I think it's right here.
Yeah.
Either one of those, yeah, there's a difference.
Yeah, thank you so much. There we go. Yep, so it should have been 1,2 right there. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Interesting, because I was looking directly at my notes and I was still missing that dash. Okay, so that picks up the fact that it is matched. And foo, we can do it now, a print R on foo to see that foo contains the match. So you can see that what matched was in fact 5/8/1985. So that is the
So
portion.
it just captures the first.
It captures only the first one. Now there is preg match all. And that would capture all the strings. So now it captures all 3 matches. You'll notice it's a multi-dimensional array in this case. The first, it's got a 1 entry. That first entry points to an array with 3 matches. So preg match all will find all substrings that match the pattern. Hey, now sometimes you want more finely grained stuff. So here I might want to be able to actually match. I want to extract the date, I'm sorry, the month, the day, and the year. And the way I can do that is put parentheses around the stuff that I want to capture. So here I want to capture the month, I want to capture the day, and I want to capture the year. So I'm putting parentheses around them. So now I'm going to get 3 matches. So we'll do it again. We'll start with just preg match first. And you can see the 0th entry still gives me the complete match. And then entries 1 through 3 give me the month, day, and year, just like I desired. If I change it to preg match all, then it will give me a match on all. So the 0th entry again is the entire string that matches. Then the first entry gives me my months, 5, 9, and 5. There's the 5. There's the 9. There's the 5. Then the days, 8, 1, and 8, right there. Whoops, there, there. And finally, my years, 85, 2005, 2008. So very handy. You can do, you can have nested parentheses. So I could, if I want it, have a second set around the day, I'm sorry, month and day. So now I have a nested set. Let's go back to just matching the first one. So now you see that the outermost parenthesis matched 5/8. Then we had the innermost. So this one appeared first, matched 5/8. Then this one matched 5, 8, and so on. Now, sometimes you really do want to match the entire string. Like if you are doing a check on something. So let's say I was checking Social Security numbers. So I'm just going to, for a moment. So let's say I wanted to check a Social Security number. and I need it to exactly match. So if someone comes in with a string like x8, oh, actually, let's do this. They come in with a string like xi, that should not be a match. Okay, so let's get that one to work. So the way we do that is we put a caret at the beginning, and that says it must match starting from the beginning of the string. So we will do \d3 dash \d2 dash \d4. And then a $sign indicates that the very last character, the end of the string, must exactly match it. So a caret at the beginning says that the pattern has to match this substring starting at the beginning of the string. The $sign says that we must match, that the substring that matches must also terminate the string. So this is saying that all that the string can contain is the social security number. Okay, so this should give us a false. And it does. I forgot to echo a new line character to make it nice. So that returned 0 right here. Well, hard to see, so we'll do it again. Didn't write it. There we go. So it returns 0 because xi preceded the start of the string. So now if I take out the xi, I get a 1. And if I put the xi at the back, it also returns 0. So that's a really useful idiom for type checking. When you want to type check a string, you often use the caret and the $sign. So another handy function is sometimes you want to rearrange things in a string. The book gave the example of a defective, say, gene or amino acid in a genetic sequence, and you want it to replace each instance of the bad amino acid with a good one. I'm not going to go there, but let's say we want to edit these dates so that we we extract the last 2 digits of the day, and we're going to go to European style so that the day and the month are swapped. So 9/1 would be, actually we're going to put the year first, then we'll put the month, and then we'll put the day. And we'll only use, do I only want to use the first 2 characters? No, I'm not going to use the first 2 characters. That's a little more than I want to do. So we can do preg replace. So again, we match as we do here, and we do string capture. Now the second string is a replacement string. And for some reason, the replacement string doesn't use the forward slashes. So all you need is the regular expression that you want to change. And the things, the parenthesized values are put in variables called $1, $2, $3, like that. So what I'm going to do is replace that pattern with $1, I'm sorry, $3, which is the year, $1, which is the month, and $2, which is the day. Okay, and also for grins, I will use dashes. So again, here's my string. Not going to echo it. And I'm not sure if preg replace does in place replacement or not, so we're going to find out very quickly. So we're going to echo out dates. And it did not get replaced, so let's call it modified dates. And that did work, although didn't quite work the way I expected it to. What did I do wrong? Oh, I still have my outer set of parentheses here. Let me get rid of those outer set of parentheses. Do it again. Okay, so now you'll notice it replaced everything in the string. So 5/8/1985 replaced by 1985-5-8. So you can do this replacement and you can limit the number of replacements that are done. So you could put a limit here. If I only wanted it done to the first string. Now you can see the second and third strings are unchanged. And there's some other things you can do. This could be an array of strings, which is very handy. So $dates could be an array of strings, in which case it would be applied to each string in the array. And then the final useful command is regexp. And it's useful for splitting a line, usually on some kind of delimiter. So usually you've read in some kind of line, like a line of words. And what you want to do is be able to split it into pieces. So again, regexp, it takes a pattern in quotes. So I'm going to do \s. And I want any number to swallow any number of white space characters. I'm splitting line. I'm going to call I'm going to get an array. I'm going to print R words. Comment out this. And I get a syntax error, unexpected words Y. 9G, print R. Well, let's see. That worked. What are we?
You have to call it as a function.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering too. Let's see. Good. Yep, had to call it as a function. Thank you. So you get a line of words in an array. And just to show you that it swallows white space, still works. Now, remember, you have to be careful. Let's say it looked like that. Notice I got something down here because \n is white space. So it thought that there should be a string between s and \n, which is the empty string. So you can get rid of that with, I think it's trim commands in PHP. So let's make sure about that. So I'm first going to echo out trim. And I think that worked. So we're going to split. And that worked. So normally if you read in a line, you'd first trim off the leading and trailing white space so that you didn't get any stuff at the beginning or the end. Okay, so again, quickly, the three things that we have shown you: preg match, preg replace, and preg split are the useful functions for doing regular expressions. So questions about regular expressions. Okay, they're very handy. I don't actually believe you're going to have to make use of them in your projects, but they are very handy for doing type checking of form data when it comes in, because remember, you can't trust form data that you receive from the client because a hacker might be bypassing that form and submitting bad data. So you always need to go ahead and type check your form data on the server side, and regular expressions give you a good way to do that. And the book, I guess I would be remiss if I did not point out that the book does talk about filters. So there are certain filter functions called, or filter var, which has certain predefined regular expressions for common things like URLs or credit card numbers, dates. I believe this one is for email. So rather than having to come up with a regular expression for many common use cases, PHP has a filter var function that allows you to provide a predefined constant that does it. As you can see here, this is a pretty nasty looking regular expression for email, but as they say, it handles 99.99% of all email addresses currently in use. So that's something else you can feel free to use. Okay, so let us move on and start talking about JavaScript. So JavaScript was originally developed by a person at Netscape, which is the predecessor to Mozilla. And it was developed in approximately 2 weeks. And the developer, I think it was Brendan Ike, said that basically they called it JavaScript to try to use or piggyback the popularity of JavaScript to get it adopted more quickly. It is incredibly C-like in its syntax. It's probably, of all the scripting languages I've dealt with, I think JavaScript has the closest resemblance to C of any language, scripting language that I have seen. So it was developed to allow interaction developed to permit user interaction with a web page. So you remember that was the goal for the person who developed PHP as well, but that was a bit different. There they wanted to be able to periodically generate updated content on the server side and then serve it to the client, not necessarily with any user interaction going on. For example, scores might be automatically updated every minute, or stock prices might be updated every 30 seconds. So on the client side, what they wanted was a way to allow the user to interact with a web page. So I have an example. So I'll first show you what the example does. So hopefully you can see it. I perhaps didn't. So you can see hello world and press me. And when I press this button, this hello world changes to hello Brad, and the black turned to green. So that is a very simple interaction accomplished with JavaScript. So here is the relevant HTML and JavaScript code that made it happen. Whoops. So here, let's see if I can make this even bigger. So here's the HTML right here. So there was a paragraph called Hello World, identified with the ID announcement, and then a button whose type is input, and you can see on click equals handle click. So when I press the button, it generates a click event, and that click event calls handle click. Up here in head, you can see that I have embedded some code in a script tag. So I've called the function handle click, and it should be indented and isn't. So you can see the first thing I do is I print something to something, I say console.log, and we will see that that is printing a debugging message to the browser console, which I'll show you in a moment. Then I let announcement equal document.getElementById announcement. So this document is a predefined object created by the browser, and it is essentially a tree that contains all the HTML elements in the document. And getElementById allows us to find the HTML element that has, whoops, the ID announcement, because down here, ID equals announcement. So that returns a pointer to that element. Now I set the element's text content property to hello Brad, and it has a style object with CSS key value pairs, and I change the color to green. And that causes the browser to update the window so that you see hello Brad in green. And if we go to tools, web developer tools, and we look at the console, I know it's not easy to see, but down there it says handle click. So that is where the print statement went, or that output for console.log went, was down here. So that is very helpful for debugging JavaScript programs, as we will see. So JavaScript code is typically embedded in these script tags, and the code is supposed to go in the head statement, although I often see it at the bottom of a page as well. And normally the code is not embed it with the HTML. We'll see that normally you put it in a separate file and then import it. The script tag can take a source attribute that indicates a URL that contains the script file. So we'll see that. But this just gives you a very simple illustration of how JavaScript can allow the user to interact with the browser through events. So events like onClick are predefined HTML events, and JavaScript supports them. And then there is something called the document object model, which we'll get to on Thursday, that allows you to get access to the different HTML elements on the page and modify their predefined properties like text content or the style. So any questions thus far about this example? Okay. So JavaScript is different from most other scripting languages, is it was deliberately crippled and not made full-featured. So the biggest limitation was that you could not read or write files. So a big limitation is that you typically cannot read or write files locally on the client, which turns out to be a huge advantage if you're trying to get your language adopted, because remember, you're running, basically this code is running on a client's machine, not on the server. So the client needs to be assured that your program isn't running amok on your computer. For example, you certainly wouldn't like it if someone downloaded some JavaScript on your browser and the first thing it did was went and encrypted all your files and then issued a ransom note. So by restricting JavaScript so that it can't read or write files, it actually gives people the confidence to run JavaScript on their machines because they know it can't, it's kind of running in a sandbox where it can't do a lot of damage. So there were some other things too. There's no pointers, because pointers are another bugaboo that hackers can use to try to get access to the operating system. So just like Java has pointers and PHP and Python have pointers, there's pointers going on in the runtime interpreter, but not explicitly that the user can somehow manipulate. So these are limitations that actually make JavaScript more palatable to use on the client side, but also means it never was meant to be a full-featured general purpose language like Python or PHP or Perl is. So in fact, let's just go quickly to look at some of my notes on this. Okay, so here's what Java was intended to do. It was intended to handle the graphical interface of a browser application. And its functionality has been expanded over the years. So now, for example, you can actually draw onto a canvas and create graphics in the browser. You can modify something called the HTML DOM object model. That's what you saw me doing with that small example. And when you modify this DOM object model, it updates the web page. You can do form validation. Specifically, JavaScript also has regular expressions that allow you to validate the data entered by a user and give them a warning if the data is invalid. You can perform simple calculations for a form. For example, if you have downloaded the sales tax and you know the price and the sales tax, then you can have JavaScript do the sales tax computation. And then it can perform custom actions in response to various events that are performed by the user. So you'll notice some things. The input is meant to be in the form of events and in the form of information input into a form. It doesn't come from a file because it can't read a file, and it doesn't come from standard in. So the original version of JavaScript also didn't have console input because that's not where the input was coming from. And by the same token, the output was basically in the form of modifications to this DOM object that would cause the web page to update its content. The output was not to a file, it wasn't to the console. So the original JavaScript also had lack of formatted output to the console. Now, again, as JavaScript's become more popular, the features have been added, and you saw me do console.log, which writes a debugging message to the browser console. So there are now things that have been added to JavaScript to make it a bit more like a regular programming language. But when you see how JavaScript operates, just remember its input was expected to come from events or a form. Its output was expected to be in the form of web content. So it doesn't really have operations for reading from standard in or writing to standard out or reading or writing from a file. Okay, so I know that JavaScript in a limited way sometimes can read and write files, but if I ask you on an exam, what is the critical feature missing from JavaScript that prevents it from being used for general purpose computing, you should answer its inability to read and write files. And that's also what makes it palatable for client-side scripting. Okay. So if you want to, I talked about how you could include script in or from a source file, and the way that you would do that is with the source attribute. So if I say, for example, source equals pretty printer.js, then the source file will be pulled from the same directory that the HTML file was pulled from. And this is considered best style because normally you don't want to expose your proprietary code to a user. Remember that most browsers have a way of looking at the page source. So if I go to Tools, Web Developer, Page Source on Firefox, it, whoops, should have given me a second. It should have given me Tools, Web Developer, Page Source. There we go. So you can get access to the page source. So normally you don't want your proprietary code visible to the entire world, and especially to hackers. So you can hide it behind the firewall by importing it through these JavaScript files, which typically end with a .js.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can't you still see all the source, like imported JavaScript and everything through web developer tools?
Interesting. I'd been told that the answer was you shouldn't
Yeah.
be able to, but maybe you can. Let me
If you can
tell
access it, like if it's
Pardon?
behind a firewall, like you said, then your browser won't be able to access it either. But if you can access it, then yeah, you can see it.
Okay. Well, let me play with that after class, because I remember when I was new to it being told you needed to, the reason for putting it into files was to, certainly for project management purposes, it's good to separate your logic from your web content. But I've been told another reason was so that you could hide the source code from prying eyes, but it may well be that you can't. So
Yeah.
good question. Go ahead.
I'm quite certain that you can't hide that. I think that's why people have like minified or like obfuscated JavaScript a lot of times.
Okay, so they're basically using obfuscation tools to do that. But then can't you just de-obfuscate it? Like with Java, there's bytecode decompilers that.
Yeah, that's correct. And browser consoles actually have that built in now. There's a button you can click that says beautify. Because the whole point of the web is to be open, right? Like that's the whole point of it. So yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes it's very difficult though to like read the obfuscated code because like the variable names are just mangled and just random characters, and it's very hard to make sense of it unless you just start reconstructing it with a lot of time.
Yeah, but if you're a hacker, you got that time. That's the problem.
Right. Yeah. You just need time for it.
Mm-hmm. Right. So basically, the thing is, it's going to discourage a casual user, but you don't care about the casual user. You care about hackers and people trying to pirate your code who are willing to invest the time to make it happen. So that is interesting. Okay. So I need to change that. So the best reason then is simply to separate the logic from the content.
Can
There's
you,
performance
Go ahead.
reasons as well. Like there's performance reasons as well. Like you can cache that file, so then when you visit multiple pages on your
Good
website,
point.
it'll not have to make that request over and over again.
That's a good point. So if you have different web pages and they all each request the file separately, it can be cached. Whereas if it's in the header, each page would be consuming bandwidth by downloading that script, and presumably forcing the interpreter to convert the source code to bytecodes, because JavaScript, from what I understand, also uses just-in-time compilation method. So they could actually compile that file and do some efficiency optimizations on it. Good point.
is
Okay.
it,
Go ahead.
would it be possible to use imports to hide, like, do your little script tag there, but then the JS file is nothing but a bunch of imports? Can you still view the files that it's importing through development tools?
Yeah, you can view everything. You can view everything the browser can view.
Because it's just a simple chasing of things. Okay, let me actually move on because there's some things I want to get to. So first thing is declaration of variables. So there is two ways to declare variables. The more recent one is let, which you saw me use when I said let announcement equals, and the older way, which is to declare something using var. So like PHP and other scripting languages, your variables don't have types, but it's generally considered a good idea to declare them. And modern JavaScript, you typically use let rather than var. There's some subtle differences between the two. So again, it's probably easier just to go through what it is. So first of all, inside of a function, if X is declared with var, it has function scope. If X is declared with let, it has block scope visibility. So if I'm in a function, foo, and I say var X, X has visibility throughout foo. If I say something like for I equals, or for let I equals 0, I less than 10, I plus plus, then I is defined only within this block. I is undefined outside of this for loop. So when I drop out of the for loop, I is undefined. So I is undefined outside So that's a subtle difference between var and let. Var gives you function level scope. Let is block level scope. If you don't declare a variable, it goes into the global namespace, which tends to be pretty bad. So if you simply use a variable, like if in this function foo, I just go ahead and say y equals 10, y will be made a global variable and stored in the global symbol table. So it is always a good idea to declare your variables inside a function. And then outside of a function, let and var also have subtle differences. So there is a global object created by every browser called window. And this global object has a bunch of predefined properties in it. For example, location, which is the URL that the browser is currently pointed at. And you can modify these properties. And for example, if you change location, then it will change the page that the browser points to. And that new page will be loaded into the browser. If you declare a variable using var, then X is added to this window object as a property. If you declare let X using let, it is not added to the window object, but it is still global. So either way, if you declare them outside of a function, they become global variables. But the difference is if you declare X using var, it goes into this global window object. And if you declare it using let, it does not. And it is dangerous to declare something using var according to the book, because if that is a pre-existing browser property, then you may inadvertently modify this property and cause unexpected changes. Now, when I actually went and tried to declare location using var, I went var location. In my browser, I got an error message saying that it was a predefined browser variable and I couldn't. But when I then went and just changed the value of location to Brad, it trashed my browser because it tried to redirect to a page named Brad that did not exist. So you need to be careful because you can modify these predefined browser variables inadvertently. And again, if you don't declare a variable at the global scope, but you just start using it, like I say, y equals 10, it will get added also to the window object. So generally, what you want to do is declare your global variables using let to avoid having them be inadvertently added to this window object, because really this window object is supposed to be keeping browser specific properties, not your own properties that you're modifying. So good practice is to declare your variables using let rather than var. That said, I didn't even know that until recently. So my code up until the last couple weeks, in fact, always used var. So that was something new to me. Okay. You already saw it, but I'm going to repeat it again. If you want to do debugging, the best way to do it is with console.log. So console.log will print things to the console for you. So here, for example, console.log color equals plus announcement.style.color. And we go to the browser. And click, oops, must be a, interesting. Must be an error in my code because nothing is showing up. What's really interesting is I'm also navigated to javascript.html. Why isn't that showing up? Okay, so big. Huh, what am I doing wrong? Ah, this right here. Interestingly enough, so this is undefined. Where's my error message? There was no error message. Interestingly enough, so there's supposed to be error messages as well, but there was no error message down here, and I'm not sure why. Okay, now I do it. Hit press me, and you can see color equals green here. Now let's do color equals just announcements.style. Press it. And you can see that's not very helpful. Color equals object CSS2 properties. So one thing I can do is it converted it to a string. So this is one thing. If I just print an object without converting it to a string, like this, you can see now it actually printed out what that object is. Color equals green. I can do in this down arrow, and it actually shows me everything that is in that style object, okay? Which is a heck of a lot of stuff. But that just gives me the essential things. And I forgot that you can also do a JSON encoding of the string, but unfortunately, I forget the command for doing JSON encoding. Does someone know the JSON encoding command? JSON.something.
I think stringify.
Is it what?
Stringify.
Stringify? See if that works. Yep, that worked. So here it stringified it. color equals color. Although it didn't work quite as well because it didn't actually print out the value of color. But you can also stringify a object and it will print. It will somehow stringify and print it. Well, it will convert that object to a JSON encoding, which you can then print out. So these are ways that you can look at things. Now, also you can go into the inspector and you can look at things. So it, no, unfortunately, I can't really make this bigger, but you look at Hello Brad, you can see that over here, it has the style sheet for it. And that style sheet is color green. So that's another way that you can look at stuff is using the inspector. And that will allow you to do it. And then of course you can go into the style editor and change things as well. So there's a lot of ways that you can do debugging with Java, but I certainly find that console.log is one of the very useful functions. Okay. So then there are a bunch of useful things associated with a string, but I'm not going to go over most of them because they're not that interesting. What I will say is that null is the, just like in C, is the way to indicate that a variable has no value. And just like PHP, you can do string interpolation in Java. These are supposed to be backslashes. I don't know why they're showing up as, oh, I'm sorry. This is correct. So I said A to Brad, B to 10. Then here, you'll notice I'm creating a string using backslashes and not backslashes, back quotes. And where you want to do interpolation, you use a $, curly brace, and then the expression that you want evaluated goes in the braces. And that expression is evaluated, and whatever value it evaluates to is what's interpolated into the string. So here, A is the string Brad. So the return of the Brad. In B is 10. So B plus 30 is 40. So that expression evaluates to 40. So this right here evaluates to 40 seconds. So that is how you can do interpolation in JavaScript, is with the back quote characters. Okay, so that is a handy thing. The operators all do what you would expect, and equal equal does a deep comparison, meaning it compares on values. So if you ever hear shallow and deep, shallow comparisons compare pointers, deep comparisons compare values. So equal equal does a deep comparison on strings and your primitive types. I'm actually not sure about objects. I would have to check that. I am less, yeah, I'd have to check whether it does a deep comparison or shallow comparison with objects. But certainly with strings, equal equal and not equal are doing deep comparisons. Okay. As I said, output is normally, so the way you do output in JavaScript, so normally it's done through the HTML DOM. But you'll notice you can do it through console.log. You can pop up, there's a function which is an alert box, and that will pop up a message. So you are allowed that, and it will pop up a message. So for example, I could say alert color equals plus announcement dot style dot color. And it popped up code equals green, and so it pops up a message. And then you can also do document.write. But you should only do that when the page is being loaded. Because it erases the previous web content. So you only are supposed to use document.write when you are loading a page. So to show you how destructive it is, I'll change this alert to document.write. And you can see the entire page got wiped out. So I never use document.write essentially, or if I have, I don't remember using it in any recent code because it's so dangerous. So typically, you either make your changes to the HTML DOM or you're writing debugging information to console.log. Sometimes you do pop up an alert message. In fact, in the final web project, if the user tries to leave the page without saving changes, you're asked to pop up an alert message. So that is one good use of the alert box, is to alert the user, especially if they're leaving the page without having completed a transaction of some type. You might want to alert them, and that can be done with an alert box. Okay, so again, I am going to, since I rejiggered everything, actually, you can still do the after class activity today, but I will redo that so that you're not doing section 8.1 and 8.2. We will pick this up on Thursday, where we're going to go over a couple of the loops and arrays and objects, and then we will get into how you write to and manipulate the HTML DOM. So I will see you all Thursday. Remember, office hours today starting at 2:35, but if you have questions, I'll also be available for a few minutes. With that, I will